Profile is presented by Inns Group, Insurance and Benefits. This week on Profile, MarkTennant, founder and CEO, Arrow Child and Family Ministries. Tell me a little bit about your background and how you were raised in your experiences so we can set a little backstory to this.
Well, my background is similar to that of most kids. You know, you're born, you're raised, you have a good, loving family, and that's how I had perceived our family to be until I turned about 10 years of age. And then rather abruptly, my mom and dad's marriage dissolved. Didn't see it coming, really wasn't aware of much marital issues going on into our home, except, you know, maybe a skirmish here or there, but all of a sudden, one day, would appear to be right out of the blue, randomly, my mom said my dad wouldn't be living with us anymore. And in short, she really had an aspiration to live apart from my dad and start a fresh life anew. And to me, that was a very short-lived dream, because within a period of time, perhaps not much more than a year, our family was pretty fragmented and fractured. Mom had probably several boyfriends in and out of the house, and I wasn't very comfortable with that. And then in the very end, she met a man by the name of Wally, entered into our life, entered into her heart, and then ultimately into our home. And with that entrance came a great deal of violence. Within a short period of time, I would be removed from my home and placed into foster care. So what began as the storybook, like a lot of kids might have with their parents, dissolved right about when I had turned about 11 years of age, entered into foster care, and then began to experience what I would refer to the mountaintop and valley experiences of being placed in the government system, being raised by someone else, and trying to find out who you are and why you're where you are. And I found myself in foster care all the way through emancipation, 18 years of age. I bounced through about 3 different placements until ultimately I was placed in the home of Bill and Joe Mack, a very committed Christian couple who really perceived foster care as their calling. God had called them to do this. And so really readily welcomed me into their home, made me feel a part of their family, and I finally felt like that was my family. And I experienced what I would call a whole lot of grace during that time. I went in as an abused kid, but then quickly began to discern my own way, and all of a sudden I'm starting to get into my teenage years. Rather than just being abused, I began to be a little bit rebellious. So I pushed every limit that I possibly could with my foster family, never really comprehending that when they said to me, "You'll always be our son, you'll always have a home here," that they really did mean it. And I couldn't understand that because I had been rejected by previous foster care placements. I had been rejected by my own mom and my own dad, perhaps. And so I couldn't understand this degree of commitment and love for me. And so I tested every limit that I possibly could to really test that, to see if this was true. And lo and behold, they really meant what they said. And it was a very trying experience for me to put my family through the various tests and trials, but in the end, their grace prevailed and our family prevailed. But it wasn't without a lot of pain.
What happened next? Did you go to school from there?
I bounced through a couple colleges until finally I settled down and landed at Oral Roberts University and felt a call into ministry, and so pursued that, got a degree in pastoral ministry, and then began to do some church work thereafter. But always in my heart I felt it is about ministry, what I'm called to do, and I could see that happening in a church setting to people and to families and to hurting people. But I always felt at some point in time I would be giving back to the community what was given to me. And it was a community. I don't necessarily believe it takes a whole village to raise a child, but it was one committed family with a lot of folks around them that yielded the success that I now experience in my life. So I felt I needed to give back to them. And that began to see some fruition in the late 1980s. I served as the vice president in the very agency that had placed me in foster care. And then from that experience, felt God working in my own heart to start fresh and anew. And in 1992, that came alive in the form of what was known then as the Arrow Project, birthed from a scripture that I became acquainted with in foster care out of Psalm 127, "Children are a gift of God, like arrows in the hand of a warrior." And my mom and dad did a very good job of targeting me for purpose, targeting me to live according to God's will. And so it was real easy for me when I felt called to do this kind of ministry, to give back to the community. We'll call ourselves the Arrow Project. This is just a little wall of history. We started Arrow in February of '92, and I put a full-page ad in the Austin paper for Father's Day, which would have just been a couple of months later, to talk about how happy of a Father's Day could it be when you have these kinds of kids who are victims of abuse and neglect.
Arrow Child and Family Ministries, what specifically is the mission and the purpose?
Well, globally, and I guess in broad terms, you say the ministry is committed to helping kids and strengthening families. We don't necessarily want to put any label on such that it's a dysfunctional family or an at-risk family or a foster child, but it's really about helping kids and strengthening families. But in that, we have been able to, through our Child and Family Services Division, to really seek out and provide services and programs and ministry for those who are most vulnerable. And those are those kids, primarily, that are in foster care, who've had abusive and neglectful situations that have resulted in their placement away from their biological family and placed into a government system. And I feel it's been our charge to create from the Christian community families who are called, much like my parents were called, to offer hope and healing and home and heart to kids who need that kind of, mom and dad need that kind of ministry in their lives.
What were the challenges you faced back in '92, and how did you overcome those challenges and continue to grow and really scale this ministry over time?
I think first and foremost the challenge was in 1992 I was a rather young green kind of guy and didn't have a lick of sense, really, to be honest, about social work. And here I was trying to start a ministry, an agency in the state of Texas to provide services to the social department, to Child Protective Services, and who am I? My greatest credential was I'm a former foster kid, so I've been there. And I needed, at that point in time, to conquer the challenge of saying, I kind of know what I'm doing. I feel like I can meet kids' needs, and though I may not have the degree, I can associate and surround myself with well-qualified people to do that. And we mitigated that challenge by doing that very thing, having good folks surround us with great passion, great heart, but with great knowledge and wisdom. And so we were able to launch the ministry at that point in time. We also had the challenge, and really continued to have the challenge, in engaging and equipping the local church to become involved in this process. These kids are often referred to as kids who are wards of the state, or these are the state kids. They're not the state kids. They're the community's kids, and they're our kids. They're the church's kids. And so there's a lot of misconceptions out there about foster kids and who they are and why they're there. And so we really have the challenge of educating the church about these kids and their needs. And it's gotten better. The church has become much more involved over the years, but it could definitely be stronger. And then just also the challenge of stepping out on faith, launching a ministry, needing the financial backing to get started. And I had that from the blessing of folks in our church to get started. But to grow the ministry throughout all these years hasn't been without that financial challenge as well.